Are you looking for some amazing weapon mods? We have already suggested the incredible Firestorm on the channel, but there are some more really cool suggestions that you should definitely give a go. Some of the most highly recommended and best mods for your weapons are actually the elemental rounds, and while they are conceptually a bit boring compared to some of the other options, they do end up being incredible because they not only add elemental damage to your weapons, but also an additional effect that usually causes them to deal some of the best damage out of many of the mods. The first example of this is Hot Shot. This imbues your ammunition with fire and increases your range damage by 15% for 20 seconds. Your shots then apply burning, which deals fire damage over 10 seconds. This is probably the best starting weapon mod out of the selection, and even if you don't get it at the very start, you can still purchase it in Ward 13 for a scrap cost. Then you have the corrosive rounds. These imbue your ammunition with toxic and increases your ranged crit chance by 15% for 20 seconds. Your shots will apply the corroded status, dealing damage over 10 seconds. Just like the Hot Shot mod, but instead for toxic ammunition, it will apply the corroded status to those enemies. And of course, the corroded status applies damage over time. It also increases the amount of damage taken from all sources by 10%, so if you apply this to enemies, you'll be dealing 10% more damage, which isn't that bad. You can get this one by defeating the boss Magister Dullion in Lossum. And then we have Overflow. This imbues your ammunition with shock and increases your rate of fire by 15% and reload speed by 15% for 20 seconds. Shots will apply overloaded that deals shock damage every 5 seconds for 15 seconds. So not only does this apply the overload status to enemies, but it also increases your DPS if you're running a ranged focus class, as you get that tasty 15% fire rate and reload speed. You can find the crafting material for this one on Narude close to the Custodian. Next up is a very unique one, it's Bore. If you're looking to exploit weak point damage on your builds, then you might want to try out Bore because it creates weak points on enemies, making them more accessible to shoot if the foe has a default weak point that's quite hard to hit. The description of the skill says it fires a drill projectile that bores into enemies on contact, dealing damage. After fully burrowing into an enemy, it then creates a weak spot which grants 50% of normal weak spot damage on hit. If attached to an existing weak spot, ranged crit chance is increased by 15% when attacking the drill and lasts for 6 seconds. So while you don't get the full 100% weak point damage, for most weapons the additional 50% damage that you get is actually pretty great. You can get this by defeating the Abomination boss on Narude. So far, many of the suggestions have been purely offensive, but what about your defensive options when it comes to weapon mods? There are a few abilities in the game that slow down projectiles like the Archon's Dome, but the Energy Wall mod will completely allow you to stop projectiles while also giving you cover to shoot through. This mod deploys an energy barrier on impact with the ground. Allies can shoot through the energy wall, but enemy projectiles are absorbed up to 500 damage received. There's a maximum of 1 wall being placed at a time, and it lasts for 30 seconds. Well, at maximum weapon level, this is able to block 1000 damage, which may be a problem in the highest difficulties where mobs do much more damage, but for general use, this is pretty nice as a defensive option if you're struggling. And this next mod reminds us of the Samuel L. Jackson meme where he's just staring at someone. It's the Fargazer mod, and it's actually pretty cool as it allows you to deal damage just by looking at enemies. The description says, calls forth an eye of the Legion to gaze at the player's aim target. For every 0.25 seconds that the Fargazer focuses on a target within 25 meters, a stack of madness status is applied for 5 seconds. Each stack deals 3 damage per second with a max of 10 stacks, and it lasts 30 seconds. And you can get this one by defeating the Legion boss in Yisha. Next, if you're looking for a mod that is a bit more utility focused than purely damage outputting, then look no further than Status Beam, as this can be very helpful in boss fights if you are struggling, as it slows down the boss, making its moves more slow, giving you some extra time to react. Meanwhile, for smaller enemies, it will completely freeze them. It does take a while to apply the slow, but it is well worth it in some scenarios if you're struggling. So if you want this cool time freezing mod, you will need to solve the Zombie Cave event in Narude. And next up is one that we weren't sure about including on this list, but a lot of people are swearing by it, and it's pretty cool in its concept because it deals 2 statuses at once. Blood Draw shoots out razor sharp chain shards which impale up to 5 targets within 15 meters and deals damage. On hit, the chains are then pulled towards the caster, dealing damage split equally among the enemies and applying bleeding over 15 seconds. But the cool thing about it is that the initial attack counts as an explosion, meaning you can use items that synergize with impact detonations like Detonation Trigger that allows you to apply a burning effect at the same time as the bleed. To get this one, you will need to pay the Red Prince's toll in the Gilded Chamber. And next up are some bonus inclusions. They probably aren't the best of the best, but they certainly do work with some builds. If you like like summoning things, you will probably want to try out Root Lash and Space Crabs because they are thematically awesome for a summoner-focused build, but they also proc the benefits of gear and items that work with summons. So if you like being surrounded by allied mobs that fight for you, then try these two mods out. You can get Root Lash by defeating Keula's Shadow on Yisha, and for the Space Crabs mod, it can be found on Narud in the hatchery, which is dropped by the Primogenitor. But what mods are you using in your build? Are there any that surprised you with how amazing they are? Tell us in the comments down below so we can all learn together as a community. And the two videos on screen now, we think you'll really enjoy if you did enjoy this one. You don't have to watch them if you don't want to, but if you did like this video, you're probably going to like these ones too. And then tell us what you think after watching in the comments down below.